This video is brought to you by Audible.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Game of Thrones podcast. I am your host, Carmine of Red Team Review, and I'm joined here once again by one of the top 5 tallest YouTubers, Preston Jacobs. Preston,
That's impossible. I'm not that tall.
you're like
Top 5?
I would say. I don't know that for a fact, but it sounds like it could be true, right? Like it sounds like it could be like a true fact. You're 6'7", right?
I'm like 6'5 3/4.
Dude, it changes every time. You said 6'7" one time.
No,
I swear to God.
I've never said
Pull the tapes.
6'7".
Pull the tapes.
I could say 6'6". I could say 6'5". I would never say 6'7". That would be insanity. Why would I ever push myself up to 6'7"?
I don't know. Might as well.
No,
Maybe if you're wearing what happens if you wear heels? Would you be like at least like mountain size, like 6'9"?
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. If I wore heels, I would be taller. Jeez. I mean, if I got a sex change operation, I'd be a woman. I mean, what are these hypotheticals?
All right, Caitlyn Jenner, calm down. Let's get into this. Okay, so guys, thank you so much for joining us again. This is the season 8 final review for the podcast. As always, we're available on SoundCloud and iTunes, so consider checking us out on those platforms. And if you do check us out on those platforms, then please leave us a review. It would help out a lot. Also, it would help me not picture Preston in heels. And guys, leave your thoughts.
Life after Thrones. Life after Thrones.
Jesus. Please leave your thoughts and comments down below. You know, we might discuss in the next episode. Go ahead.
Do you feel like we're dwelling, like we've spent like too much time dwelling on this last episode and this last season? Like it's just too much. Like before, you know, it wasn't as bad, so it didn't seem so bad to dwell on it. But now, you know, the ending is so horrible that everyone kind of wants to forget it, and we're like forced to sit here and like relive it and rehash it.
You know, I've seen the season 8 like 4 times already. Like I watch every episode as it comes out at least 3 times, and then I rewatched the entirety of this season last week once. So I've already seen every episode 4 times each. It doesn't get better, but you start to soften up on it. Like everybody loves everybody loves to, well, all except for one episode. Everybody loves to tout that episode 3 was like, ugh, so bad. But episode 3 is not as awful as people say or remember. Episode 6 is still bad. That's still all trash. That's still trash.
Yeah. So what happened? So I've been doing this rewatch, and at this point, so Carmine and I have this plan that we're gonna talk about the last episodes, but you know, when I'm fresh with each one, right? So I've watched episodes 1 and 2, so those are fresh in my mind, and then later on in this podcast, we're gonna switch to like 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and so there's gonna be a time jump. But so I've just watched 1 and 2, and I will say 1 stayed about the same. 2, which everyone is so nostalgic for, was just horrible on the rewatch.
How dare you? I loved episode 2, especially the ending. Oh my god, I loved episode 2. 1 is alright. You're right. 1's alright.
Yeah, 1's fine, but 2 because it's all this like you know, it's all this nostalgia and all this buildup. Like, this is our last night, and then no one dies. So like, oh, then what was this nostalgia for?
Yeah, that is the one thing that makes episode 2 not as like, because I will say, like, let's say I'll give episode 2 like an 8. Let's just say, I'm not saying I'm giving it an 8. Let's just going back and after the series is done and rewatching it goes down a few points, because you're right. It's like Tormund has this like really somber moment of saying, "We're all going to die," and only like a few of them die. So.
Right, and then Tyrion actually says like, "I think we're gonna make it," and then everyone's like starts laughing, and you're like, everyone in that room made it. Like there was no one died.
You know, it's funny too. I think the director of that episode, he came out with it was an article that came out in an interview with him where he goes, he wanted almost everyone to die in that battle. He had a vision for Jorah's death, which was Jorah charges in. We see the charge. It doesn't work. We see a couple of Dothraki running out of the darkness. And all of a sudden, Jorah comes back on his horse, and like half his body is missing, or he's beheaded or some shit.
Oh God.
Yeah, he wanted to make that episode brutal.
Yeah, no, that would have been great.
Now, Carmine, you're going to hate me, but I have to break here for a sponsor. So many people ask me, Preston, how do you notice such crazy details in Ice and Fire? And honestly, one thing that really helps me catch little things is that I listen to audiobook versions of A Song of Ice and Fire, and I think I comprehend things better on an auditory level. The audiobooks also allow me the time to take in information while doing other tasks, like commuting to work, doing chores, or getting exercise. So currently I'm listening to The Name of the Wind, the first book in the Kingkiller Chronicles, on Audible. It's been on my recommendation list for a while, and I'm finally getting around to it. It's a fantasy epic with an unconventional structure that jumps between a medieval setting in the present and a man chronicling his past adventures, with several more stories within stories. And so this month, that is July, Amazon Prime members can start an Audible membership and save 66% on your first 3 months. Pay just $4.95 per month for the first 3 months, and then it's $14.95 per month after that. The offer is valid until July 31st. Visit audible.com/PrestonJacobs or text Preston Jacobs to 500-500 to get started today. With Audible, you get 3 titles every month, 1 audiobook from the largest selection of audiobooks on the planet, and 2 Audible originals that you can't hear anywhere else. Unused credits are rolled over to the next month, and it's convenient. You can listen to it on any device. So it's a great way to catch up on titles you've been meaning to get around to. Not to mention, the titles are yours forever, even if you cancel. So go to audible.com/PrestonJacobs or text Preston Jacobs to 500-500 to get started today. As I said, this month is a special month for Amazon Prime members. You're getting 3 months for the price of 1.
Yeah, during the rewatch of 1 and 2, there's so many things that are just dropped plots. Like, that's the thing. Like, you don't catch on the first watch through, or even when we were doing our reviews, because you rewatch it, but you still have this like potential, like you're like, oh, you just kind of give them the benefit of the doubt that these things are going places, and then they just don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the dragons aren't eating. Okay, no, that was nothing. Like, oh, stuff like that. So there's a lot of that.
It's funny you say that because I feel like we caught a lot of stuff, but you're right. The one thing I'm thinking about is like the one thing that still bugs me about like the first 2 episodes is like Melisandre. Melisandre is purposely left out of the first episode, and then you get there, and then she gets to first 2 episodes, then she gets to episode 3, and you're like, oh, here we go, Lord of Light joining the fight, and it almost amounts to nothing.
Yeah. There was a lot. I mean, I realized like just watching it opens with Arya and focused. It's very Arya focused, the first episode, and she has all these smiles, and there's even inspirational music as a dragon flies over and she smiles.
Your favorite scenes.
Well, but at the same time you're like, okay, you're establishing that these dragons are inspirational, but they're inspirational to no one. Like, no one like got behind those dragons and were like, yay, and certainly not Arya. And then I realized that they play this inspirational dragon music like while Sansa is looking worried as the dragons fly over. And you're like, oh, that music isn't fitting at all. Like, that they actually went somewhere with. Like, Sansa was consistently anti-Dany through the entire season.
Well, so before we continue on to episodes 1 and 2, I got to ask you this. So ever since Throne has ended, I've recently been binge watching the hell out of this new show at the behest of someone. The Handmaid's Tale. Now, The Handmaid's Tale, for those of you who don't know, it's based off a book. It's only 1 book. However, it's now on season 3. And this is so rare. Like, I've almost never seen this before. How many times have you ever seen the first season or the first movie not be as good as everything that comes after? Because the first season of Handmaid's Tale is okay, but season 2 and season 3 so far have been amazing. It's rare.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of series that have this happen. The Leftovers.
Oh God, here we go.
I know, because I love The Leftovers so much. But The Leftovers season 1 is based on a book, and then that material is done, and they had to do seasons 2 and 3. I felt that the later 2 seasons were just as good as the first season. What else? True Blood, I think.
Yeah, True Blood. Okay, yeah.
But True Blood definitely goes downhill
after season 3, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then there was another one that's Big Little Lies.
Big Little
first
Lies.
Season. Big Little Lies. I mean, I haven't watched the second season yet because it's
well, you can't say anything about it if you haven't seen the second season.
Well, I haven't seen the second season, but it's another one where the first first season is based on the book, and then there isn't a book for the rest.
Well,
there's a few, in general, there are some properties that were like movie wise that are better than the book, but it's rare. I mean, they say Fight Club the movie is better than the book. They say Forrest Gump, the movie is better than the
yeah,
book.
of course, Forrest Gump. Like that's all I hear about Forrest Gump. But Handmaid's Tale, I binged the hell out of seasons 1 and 2. There was only one book for the Handmaid's Tale, the Margaret Atwood book. There's only one book. She's gonna do like multiple books now that this like property is huge now. But the first season, I would say, it was all right. We get to season 2, bro. It's so much better. Like it's amazing, and it's funny too because. So this is what we kind of wanted them to do with Thrones. So what the Handmaid's Tale writers do is they take characters that are established in the first book, and then afterwards they do their own thing with it. They go off and they do their own thing, and it works. Believe it or not, it actually works. And once again, The Handmaid's Tale, it's one book. It was never planned as multiple sequels. These characters were never, their end games were never laid out by the author. But it's funny. Apparently, the author came on board on the writing team, and she was active in like where to go in season 2 and 3. And it's good. It's really good. So imagine.
Is there a tonal shift like there is with Thrones when we move beyond the book?
Not really. Like all the characters have gradual storylines that evolve beyond the first season / book, and it makes sense for those characters. I mean, some people would argue they would never do that. Okay, fine, but at the same time, if you don't like where season 2 is going, I mean, season 1 can still be your truth because once again, it's one book versus. What they're actually doing with it, which is so good. I recommend it to you of all people, because I know for a fact that you'll fucking love this stuff. And I look at Thrones, it's like, someone fucked up here. It's either George R.R. Martin, who wasn't like, active in the writing, or it was, like, I asked you a question a couple weeks ago, like, whose fault is this? And you said George R.R. Martin, and I had to disagree with you.
No, I mean, I think there's a lot of fault to go around, but I do think that George R. R. Martin's played a role in the sense that he gave D&D hope that he was going to, release a book and give them material, and so they spent a couple seasons waiting around, having characters wait around, and then they kind of had these plot points, and they're like, well, we're plot committed at this point. We're going to have characters wait around for plot points and then hit the plot points. And then everyone's like, wait, how are they jumping around? How are they jumping around the map and doing this shit without motivation and teleporting? And it's like, well, because, D&D were just, forcing characters into plot points that they heard. So I say that it's partially George R. R. Martin's fault. I would say that the dialogue is horrible.
Yeah, that's
horrible. And that's Dave and Dan's fault. I think that like people jumping to plot points without motivation is partially George R. R. Martin's fault for being a tease, and D&D for not having the courage to do their own thing.
And that's what I was gonna basically come to the conclusion of, because if you think about it, Dave and Dan should have just honestly done their own thing, and because they were forced to stick to like everyone's endgame. Bran's endgame is supposedly in the books. This is what Isaac Hempstead said. We don't know this for a fact, but apparently Isaac Hempstead, who plays Bran, was told by George that at the end of the books, Bran becomes king. Now this might change. Yeah. Who knows? We don't. George, changes his mind all the time. But if you think about it, when we leave Bran's character in the 5th book, he's still in the Cave of the Three-Eyed Raven. Now, Dave and Dan have to fill in the fucking blanks in between that spaces to get Bran to be the king. And they're almost constricted in the way of having this character do certain things to stay in that realm to still be in Westeros enough to be king at the end. Whereas in The Handmaid's Tale, they can do whatever the fuck they want. And not only that, they have the author there writing with them, so that way it still has the flavor of the first book and the authenticity with the author there.
Right, you got the buy-in, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and I don't know. I don't want to say it's George's fault because what the fuck? Like, the first 3 seasons were amazing. So did they really need George there if they had, like, some good stuff?
No, and that's what I'm saying is have the courage. Like, look, Avengers Infinity War. That's based on the Infinity Gauntlet. And there are elements of the Infinity Gauntlet that are very similar to the movie. And there are things that are completely and utterly different. Like Thanos doesn't die in the comic book. Tony Stark doesn't die in the comic book. The person that gets the glove after the big fight is Nebula. She snaps her fingers and brings everybody back, and puts everything back the way it was. There isn't a 5-year gap. I mean, there's a lot of enormous differences between the comic book and the movie, but both function and both work. And I mean, plot holes aside, Endgame was a great movie. Like it was good enough that I ignored that. You can kind of forgive the plot holes, but it's very, very different from the source material, and that's fine. People don't need everything to be exactly close.
To be fair, in the comics, I'm vaguely familiar with it. I feel like you're more familiar with it than I am. Isn't Thanos' sole reason for gathering the stones and killing off like a good chunk of the population of the galaxy? Doesn't he want to impress Lady Death or something like that?
Yeah, he wants to. He's in love with Death, and he believes. So that they have his complete different motivation. Yeah. So in the movie, it's an environmental argument that there's not enough resources, and so he needs half as many living things, which doesn't really make sense, but okay. Because life feeds on life, and if you resources are life, but nonetheless, in the comic book, it's simply he's in love with Death, and he believes egregiously, this is actually an incorrect fact, that there are more things alive today than have ever died. And that he believes to correct this imbalance, he needs to kill half of the universe in order to have more things dead than things that are alive. And so that's his motivation in the comic book. Very completely and utterly different.
Of course. But here, once again, like, you gotta watch Handmaid's Tale, man. I was gonna do a video on it. You gotta watch Handmaid's Tale. It really is worth it. But no, like the writers for Handmaid's Tale did a very good job, and I wish the writers for Thrones did their own thing going forward. Like fuck whatever George's plans were. Like there's no way people in that writing room thought that Bran being the king at the end was a good idea. There's no way there was anybody in that writing room who thought that.
It's an ending that well, first of all, it's an ending that I've been semi-predicting for years. And so it's 100% George. Like when the actor says, "Oh, George told me that this is going to be my ending." Yeah, of course, and I don't think it was a big surprise to a lot of like huge book fans, but but it's how they got there. Like they had this plot point, Bran is king at the end, and you kind of had a few loose things on the reasoning, like it has to do with stories, and it's like. I could see George pulling it off, maybe. Again, I don't know if George can pull it off because we don't have the written book, but you have to be in George's style and writing style to get there and have it work. I think, and D&D are not that writing style.
Okay, well, Preston, let's open up this autopsy and find out what happened. So, Preston, let's start with episode 1 and 2. And you recently saw episode 1 and 2. You're very fresh on them. Anything to add that we didn't really get to before?
Well, like, let's see. I mean, I would say that on my second, well, I guess on my fifth, sixth watch through, but this is like my rewatch where it's been a while, where this is the first time I saw it since finishing and coming back. Just a lot of brought up plots that are then just dropped. For instance, I remember like in the first episode, they spend all of this time talking about the Karstarks. Like Alice Karstark arrives and Tyrion's like, "Oh, the Karstarks, they have one of the better sigils." And then Alice Karstark just fucking vanishes. Like she just fucking vanishes, if you remember. Like we don't see her killed. She's just gone.
I guess she dies off screen.
She dies off screen, but we never see it. Just stuff like that, which is, but it's really conspicuous when they like spend the time to be like, oh, the Karstarks, like for no reason, like times, and I also there's so much time killing. I just couldn't believe how much time killing there is.
It really should have been like one giant episode. Like, remember, someone even like said on Twitter, like, remember when before the season 8 began, we were all told that this were all going to be one giant movie, and it really just wasn't.
No, the episodes were 1 hour. Plus, you said you've got the beginning and the endings with the inside the episode and the theme music and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and then Tyrion moving chairs and awkward pauses, and there's just, I mean, it's odd how it can be it's amazing that they can make it simultaneously rushed and have all of this like time killing in there at the same time. Like, you'd think they'd go against each other, but I think the formula was just waiting around for plot points to happen, but not actually doing anything to progress the story. So when the plot point happens, it's sudden and jarring. And that just seems to be what they're doing. They just kind of said, oh, let's all just have everybody hang out. And then all of a sudden battle. And then everyone hangs out. And then everybody battles. And then Dany switches sides, or goes nuts. So it's just odd. I don't know what else happened in episode 1 that noticed that was really weird. Oh, Euron. So Euron's motivation like completely changes because he's talking to Yara, and she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, the army of the dead's coming, and he's like, whatever, I can just fuck off and like sail somewhere else. So he acts like he's completely not invested in the situation in Westeros. But then later on, he does seem invested. He wants to fuck the queen. He wants to kill Jaime Lannister. He wants to have a kid with her. He swims to shore and has a fight and dies for something he's supposedly not invested in the first episode. Just a lot of weird stuff. I don't know. Do you remember anything that really stuck out for you, like on your watch through?
Pretty much what you said. I feel like the first 2 episodes really hyped up a lot of stuff, and then the rest of the season just let us all down. It's almost as though like everybody directing each of these episodes to try to get to the end game all had a different idea about how to get there and how to set the tone and what to do with it, and they all just hated each other's ideas, so they just did whatever the fuck it is they wanted. Much like what happened with Arya last season. And even then, coming from season 7 to season 8 was so weird with how the first 2 episodes proceed. Once again, I do like the first 2 episodes, but it's just that they set up and hype up so much shit. The major issue is that everything afterwards is a letdown. The first 2 episodes are supposed to set up the White Walker battle, and then we get to the battle in season 3, and it's not as great as we thought it would be. Not to mention Melisandre is absent for the first 2 episodes. Or like, oh, she's gathering her forces in Volantis, and nothing's going down. Cersei and the Golden Company. Oh, well, the Golden Company, there you go. Maybe we're going to get, Cersei's finally going to have a group of people that aren't just random douchey pirates and an actual fighting force that can pose a threat to the heroes. And no, that turned out to be nothing. And speaking of Cersei, by the way, we read in the leaks that she was supposed to have a miscarriage, and I don't know, like, remember when because everybody also read the leaks as well, or, watched a video about them. Remember everybody was, like, freaking out about her taking a sip from the glass of wine or whatever?
That scene was really weird because when I rewatched it, I noticed that she's sipping the wine and she has really shiny eyes and an awkward smile. It almost looks like she's nearly crying. Like, Lena Headey looks like she's about to weep or tear up. When Euron starts talking about, wanting to put a prince in her belly and stuff, which is really weird because it would almost be like, oh, if they had a previous scene of her having a miscarriage and being told by Qyburn that she's, going through menopause or something, that look would make sense, but she doesn't. They didn't include it. She's pregnant. And they reinforce in the first episode with Jaime talking to Tyrion that she's pregnant and that it's not a lie. She's really pregnant. And so that leak, I feel like they just must have changed it, and that they had some scenes and then they wanted to shift it and they added some other scenes.
Didn't you say they also changed something in this episode when Jon's riding the dragon in regards to like, it's like he could read my thoughts or something. I swear that was you who said that.
Oh, somebody. I did read that in the leak, but he doesn't. He doesn't end up saying that in any of the episodes.
So they likely cut it out.
Yeah, and it's funny as well, like watching that, because Jon riding the dragon is, of course, pretty useless thing in the end. Like that doesn't really lead anywhere unless you count like a few seconds of battling each other in the skies.
And did Jon really need to ride the dragon in episode 3, considering that was the last time he would pretty much do that?
No, he didn't. I mean, they could have cut him out of the because you couldn't even tell what was going on up there anyway. Mm-hmm. There's just a bunch of battles. It could have just been Dany up there, and that would have been fine. There was no point in Jon riding a dragon, and so a lot of things like that came out. Like Arya brings up the fact that Jon came back from the dead, and then you say, "Oh, right, Jon came back from the dead." Huh? That really went nowhere. Like it wasn't relevant at all. Like no one had extra faith in Jon for him coming back from the dead. I mean, maybe it influenced Tormund a little bit, but Tormund seemed pretty behind Jon regardless. Like I was really expecting there to be some sort of religious movement, like the wildlings started the wildlings would follow Jon as a savior, as some sort of god, but that never went anywhere.
It's almost like they had Jon ride the dragon just to have that one scene in episode 4 where we get that shot of Dany looking a little annoyed because Tormund's like, "Who rides a dragon? A madman or a king?"
That's actually funny that Tormund actually becomes the embodiment of all of the wildlings. Like we hear about the wildlings a little bit here and there, but we don't actually see any wildlings except for Tormund. Like we know that wildlings are in the battle. And supposedly when they took Winterfell, the army was mostly wildlings, and then the Vale army comes in, and then the Vale army kind of disappears. You see a couple shields here and there, and you see Royce. Like Royce just becomes the embodiment of the Vale army. Oh, Royce is there. I guess there must be 10,000 Vale soldiers. Oh, Tormund is there. I guess there must be thousands of wildlings, but we don't actually see that many. And it brings me back to other lines, like Tormund saying, "Oh, they said you're some kind of god, but what kind of god would have a pecker that small?" Like, that's the only line we hear about Jon being supernatural or being a god to be worshipped, which I really thought they were going to go with, but they never did. They just know. Like, so when you go back and all of these things are brought up, you're like, huh, yeah, no, that really went nowhere.
It really did, if you think about it, because who knows that he was brought back? Beyond Davos and, the usual suspects, all the wildlings know it. Obviously, they've gossiped amongst each other, and a good chunk of the wildlings have been at Winterfell for quite some time. They've probably spread the rumor around. Everybody at Castle Black who wasn't killed for being traitors, they all know about it. So yeah, the news is probably spread around the north fairly quickly, and it's not really brought up that much. You're right.
Yeah, another thing that's really stuck out, I actually started chuckling out loud at this, was Arya's special weapon.
Oh, the spear? Or the staff spear thing?
I just remember all of the videos online that had appeared. Like, what is Arya's special weapon? What does it look like? And they were just like, this is something special. And then it just turns out to be a double-headed spear. Like, why did it need to be, like, why did she have to have secret designs and everything and like to give it to Gendry? Like, she could have just said, "Hey, can you make me a double-headed spear?" Oh yeah, okay. Like did there need to be like schematics for a double-headed spear? Like, is it super complicated?
Yeah. And now that you mentioned that, and as I was saying with the whole Cersei drinking wine thing, there seemed to be a lot of unnecessary scenes, a lot of unnecessary things in general that just lead nowhere. One great example is the Golden Company guys. Like, who gives a fuck about them? They turned out to be nothing. I think Henry Strickland, that's his name, right? Henry Strickland, I got that right? Harry Strickland. He had less than 3 minutes of screen time. At best. There have been background. Roz the prostitute has more screen time than this fucking guy.
Oh, sure.
And what else? I was looking it up. I was looking at here. The the whole Qyburn scene with Bronn, that ultimately came out of nowhere and was just put in there just so Bronn, I guess, the audience could be reminded that Bronn's still a cool character and he's still there and he can be Master of Coin at the end. And it also, I guess, gives him an excuse to have some type of lordship. What else?
I guess, but yeah, the dragons not eating.
The dragons not eating, which you're very into.
The Ironborn plot is really comically fast. Like even on the rewatch, I'm just like, oh my god, like that was it. Like
Yara doesn't appear again at all. I thought Yara would have at least appeared for maybe a brief sea battle, or maybe to bring Dany's army over from Winterfell or White Harbor to Dragonstone, and maybe we'll get like a brief scene between Yara and Euron fighting, or maybe their fleets fighting. But no, nothing happens. We only see her at the very end. Characters who should have appeared at least in one episode either do and then fuck off for the entire series, or they never do. Like Mira Reed. Mira is completely forgotten. Gilly gets more scenes than Mira.
Oh yeah, Mira completely forgotten. She had her send off, go fuck yourself scene last season. A lot of weird stuff. The symbols obviously were brought up and made really ominous. I mean, the first episode ends with them saying, "Oh, it's a sign from the Night King." What does it mean? What does it mean? Well, it means nothing.
It means nothing, right?
It means nothing. Like he spent the time to hang Ned Umber on the wall with all of those arms for no reason at all.
Well, to be fair, let's not say it doesn't mean anything yet. The prequel might answer what those symbols mean, but for right now, it means nothing.
See, this is like season 5 apologies. Like hey, season 5, it's building up to something. You're like, oh, and then season 6 sucks. No, it's building up to something. And then season 7, no, it's building up to something. It's not building up to anything. I'm just kind of, these symbols, nothing is building up to anything. That's my belief now. Some other things that, Randall Tarley's death was ultimately not for anything.
It didn't matter. It was brought up. She tells Sam, she killed her. I'm sorry. Let me redo that.
Yeah.
So Randall Tarley, his death meant almost nothing in the end, and telling Sam, I guess you had to because it's a thing, but at the same time, you expect it to come around full circle in some way. And I guess Sam told Jon out of maybe anger. You could argue that.
I mean, it's a catalyst. But like they were gonna tell him anyway,
right?
Maybe it made it happen quicker, but it still happened.
And you also expect Randall Tarley's death to come in some regard with Sam towards the end, but not really. Like I expected Sam to be like the new lord of House Tarley or Hornhill, but
right, and that's super confusing in the end because we don't know actually what happened. Like what happens to Sam is a big contradiction. Like. On the one hand, he's a member of the Night's Watch, so he can't hold lands. But then he's at the council representing the great houses, so he can represent his house. And then at the end, he's a maester, so he's once again not representing his house. So, they couldn't call up the actress that played his sister,
right?
But yeah, oh gosh. It's funny though, because actually all of the conflicts that are brought up to put a wedge between Jon and Dany, and there are a lot. You have Dany killing Randall Tarley. You have Sansa. You have the fact that they're related, the incest. You have the succession issue. You have the fact that like Varys and Tyrion think that Jon has a better state of mind than Dany. In the end, none of those things caused Jon to kill Dany. Like Jon killed Dany because she was too sure of herself, and he wasn't. Like he didn't believe he knew what right and wrong was, and she did, and so he felt that was enough to like kill her. But it's funny, though, that all of these other issues are brought up. Like, this is going to be the thing to, like, drive Jon, and it's like every time he's like, she's my queen. She's my queen.
I love when you imitate him. It's not your decision to make.
That's your decision. God, I just wanted Grey Worm to just kill everyone. That would have been awesome.
You mentioned Euron. To put on top of that, like, all of a sudden, like, he really cares about Cersei. All of a sudden, like, he's super into her and super into the whole thing, despite the fact that his character was mostly about just doing his own thing and trying to fuck the queen for, like, you know, bragging rights. And, like, you really don't get the feel that Euron really gives a fuck too much about that alliance. Like, that was on a bunch of people's theory videos that he was going to betray Cersei in the end.
Right.
But then he's, like, the most committed person to her, next to Kyber.
Right, and Jaime, I guess.
Right.
But, like, you know, they're all pretty. Everybody's committed to Cersei. I don't know what she does to demand such loyalty, but you know, it works out. It was a lot of, so they really seem to focus on structurally reunions. They're like, oh man, this is going to be a reunion, and we're gonna put Jaime and Bran in the same situation, and we're gonna have, and then somehow they think sparks are going to fly just by putting two characters in the same place, but then they don't write them any dialogue. And so it's just really weird.
Yeah, Jaime and Bran really went over quick. I liked it, but it went over a little too quickly.
Sure, but it's like you could pick it for anything. Like Arya has not seen Gendry in years, and they finally have their reunion, and their reunion is, can you make me this spear? You're really, tell me what the dead are like. They're like death. They're like death. You're really stupid. I can throw some blades into the wall. Okay, I'll make you your spear. And then later, let's have sex. Like that was their reunion. Like they didn't, I don't know. It's just no conversation, nothing to really connect. No sharing of ideas, you know, like, or the Hound and Arya, you know, like they get back together and then they don't kind of say anything. Like the Hound first calls her a bitch, and then they're on the parapet and they just kind of sit there silently. Beric and Arya, all of these things. It's like, I'm actually kind of reminded of one of my least favorite trope Saturday Night Live skits. So Saturday Night Live has this pattern where they'll have a character do a celebrity impression, like for several seasons. You know, like you'll have Tina Fey doing Sarah Palin for like many seasons,
right,
and then everyone will really love the impression. And then they're like, what if we get the real Sarah Palin and we put her on like stage at the same time, and then that'll be funny. And then it happens, and it's just kind of weird and awkward. Like there's nothing for the two characters to say to each other, like the real Sarah Palin and the fake Sarah Palin. And so they just kind of go, oh. Like the audience claps, and then that's the end of it. They do this all the time. They had Jesse Eisenberg.
I was just thinking at Mark Zuckerberg.
With Mark Zuckerberg. I was
just thinking that.
But they do this all the time. Like the real celebrity with the invitation. And you're like, okay, and? Like you need to do something. You can't just have it be a reunion. So like they're sitting in this writer's room saying, okay,
it's cringiest thing ever.
It's going to be so cool when we finally have, you know, Beric Dondarrion and Arya on the parapet again. Or, you know, we're finally going to have the Red Woman and Arya together. Though I will say that Arya and the Red Woman actually had a few things to talk about compared to many. But, you know, Brienne and Jaime, they're going to get together, but then they don't actually say anything. Their conversation is, you didn't drink. And then they fuck.
And we discussed this last season with Arya mostly. And I forgot if it was you who said it or I who said it, but it felt as though several different people were writing each episodes the way they thought the episode should have gone. And the reason I point to Arya is because Arya is one person one episode and a different person the next. You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it feels like that here. It feels like the writing guys, the people in charge of like writing the scripts and dialogues, they're not in sync with each other.
Oh, one thing that really struck me about the first two episodes, again, this gets back to my whole thing about everyone sucking Tyrion's dick. Like, there's so much praise of Tyrion. Like, is Tyrion going to remain, like, Dany's hand? Like, this is a big issue in the first couple episodes. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my gosh, like, Tyrion is screwed up, and he's screwed up big. Is Dany going to keep him on his hand? And then she's finally like, no, we've got to protect you. We've got to protect you and your mind, your incredible mind. We've got to put you in the crypts. And it's this, and for what? Like,
even Jorah vouches for him at one point.
Yeah, there's a whole scene of Jorah like vouching for Tyrion, saying, "Oh, but the mind behind that sassy mouth," like what? Like it didn't go anywhere. Like what was Tyrion's mind saved for?
So Tyrion's mind is really what the audience likes about the character, but the problem is that Tyrion's mind, when we liked it, was written by George for the first 4 seasons. And now I guess the writers are like, well, the audience loves Tyrion. He's their favorite character, and because he's smart and clever and whatnot. So, we should throw in there that Dany really needs to keep him, but they can't write anything clever for him to do. So what reason does Dany really have to trust him? That's the one thing that really annoyed me. And you pointed out multiple times, like, Dany is very smart for not trusting Tyrion and being very cautious of him, because he really has cost her a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I read some like fan theories that were like, it would be really cool if like the big like switch and surprise at the end is that Tyrion was working for Cersei, and that Bran would uncover it, and he'd pull out the "I never bet against my family" line, and as like proof of it, and Tyrion would be caught, and I'd be like, well, that would be unexpected, but it would make sense. But of course that didn't happen. I mean, Tyrion does bet against his family.
We can't have Tyrion siding with Cersei. She hates the shit out of him. So, but the whole betting against my family thing, and maybe like something deep inside him would never allow him to side against his family. I mean, that makes more sense.
Yeah, there's so going into episode 2, which is episode 1 is, I would say, a lot of random little plots that get introduced as possible problems that go nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And there's quite a few pointless reunions, but then episode 2 is more reunions, but this time the reunions, they spend a little more time dwelling with each other.
Right. And episode 2, I gotta say, is my favorite episode of this entire season. Especially the ending. I've said this multiple times. I love this episode. I think it's great. What they really should have done was cut the fat from episode 1 and just put episode 1 and 2 together.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that they could have fit everything from 1 and 2 in the same. I mean, 2, you did not need an entire episode of everyone hanging out and waiting for. I mean, for the.
I would argue you kind of did, because once again, we can't just open up the season with one major battle. We've never done that with Game of Thrones. And we kind of need to get the characters to know each other, to hang out a bit more, to actually form a connection. But it's like you said, every time there's a chance for them to form that connection, the writers just drop the ball, like with Arya and the Hound, or Arya and Gendry, and, like Jaime and Brienne, which I kind of like their relationship a little awkward and a little like, will she, will he, Ross and Rachel type of thing. But even then, it's like, come on.
Oh, there's so many other things that I noticed. Okay, so Jaime's trial, where Brienne comes out and vouches for him. It occurred to me that Brienne already revealed to Sansa Jaime's good character in season 7. When Sansa sends Brienne down to King's Landing, Brienne says, King's Landing is dangerous. You're sending me down there, and Sansa says, you said that Sir Jaime was kind and noble to you, like he'll protect you. And I was like, oh, she already revealed that. Then what was it? What was she revealing to Sansa during the trial? Like, she already knew all this.
I guess she was revealing it again for the sake of like Dany, who wasn't there to hear that, or maybe Jon.
I guess, but then why would Sansa bring up like the streets of King's Landing and Ned and Jaime in front of the whorehouse? Like, it doesn't. They just forgot that scene.
I guess it's to defend it a little. I guess it's because you still got to show Sansa as being like strong, independent ruler who has to take charge in a way and get on Jaime's case about it.
Yeah. I mean,
that can't go unanswered.
Jaime essentially got out of his trial through a lot of changes of subject. Like, you've done something really bad that you should be executed for. Now let's talk about the fact that Cersei didn't bring her army north. Well, wait a minute. What about, like, the fact that he killed your dad? Like, that was never resolved. They just changed the subject. And then the subject was about, Brienne vouching for him, which, is meaningless when it comes to killing Aerys or whatever. So many weird things. Oh, gosh. They spent a lot of time with Tyrion waxing poetically about, like, everybody fighting for the Starks, and he wants to see his father's face of them, like, defending Winterfell, and asking everybody about the battles they've survived and stuff like that. It's it's just off. Because one, like, I never thought of Tyrion hating I never thought of Tywin, like, being this huge Stark hater. Like, he kills the Starks out of necessity.
Right.
But would he really be like, oh God, my son's defending Winterfell? Like, would that really be something he'd, like, be disgusted at,
He'd be a little disappointed and annoyed, but once again, out of necessity, he'd probably get on board.
There's an army of the dead coming. Like,
yeah.
He's come. Would Tywin not be for fighting the army of the dead?
I mean, Tywin would be for fighting the army of the dead, but Tywin would jump at the chance to send Tyrion there, but keep Jaime back.
Yeah. Or he might pull a Cersei and be like, well, I'll wait for the army of the dead to kill my foes first or something. But I don't know. I don't know if he'd be, like, disappointed. It's this weird rewriting of history. Like, everybody here fought the Starks at one point. No, like, Jaime did. Like,
Jaime did. Tyrion got knocked out, so he was gonna fight the Starks. Davos was on Stannis' group, and in a sense, because Davos aligned himself with Stannis burned the leeches, which killed Robb, you could argue. So I guess Davos, by association...
Davos was trying to stop him. He was trying to stop him.
That's true, but by association, Brienne killed those Stark soldiers in Season 2?
Brienne killed those Stark soldiers at the beginning of Season 2, or maybe it was the end of Season 1, I forget.
The end of Season 2. And then Tormund did fight Jon Snow at one point.
The Stark soldier... The one that she sword rapes him. Yeah. It's like a very clear, like rape scene. Yeah.
So, in a way, they all did kind of fight the Stark. In a way.
Tyrion wouldn't have known about the sword raping. He wouldn't have known.
Well, she was also on Renly's side, and I guess Renly was also in opposition with Robb. I guess, for a little bit.
Not really. They had a truce.
Did that truce even go down? Like, was it official before Renly was killed?
In the show, it like Catelyn agrees to a truce between he and Renly. Yeah, Renly says, "Yeah, you can call yourself king of the North, and we'll but eventually you've got to be part of the Seven Kingdoms." And Catelyn's pretty much like, "Okay, cool, that sounds like a deal." And then Renly gets killed. It's not the book deal, but whatever.
Oh man, episode 2. Like I said, I liked it. I really did. It really did. But it did feel like DLC to episode 1, like downloadable content. It really should have been one giant episode. They love to tout that the entire season was going to be like one giant series of movies. But...
Oh my god, the fact that episode 2, like, it's funny that you're like, oh, episode 2 is my favorite, but at the same time, it does feel like an extra scene. Like, doesn't every scene feel like a deleted scene?
Yeah, it really does. I don't know, like
this isn't essential to the plot. It's kind of mildly interesting, so we'll put it on the DVD's extra.
You know what I should do? I should just download episodes 1 and 2, which I already haven't downloaded actually, and I should just remove the fat from episode 1 and just combine it with 2, because there are a lot of scenes that are really not necessary. I will say
it's all fat. It's all fat.
I will say the one thing that is kind of necessary, and I like that they did put it in there, is a little date with Jon and Dany. Jon didn't need to ride the dragon, but the fact that he did, I mean, I wanted that romance there, and they put it in there.
I mean, there's a few things that are needed. They need to walk in. Bran needs to say, the wall is fallen, and she has the Night King has your dragon. And then they kind of need a little bit of a war room thing to explain, like, what they're going to do strategy-wise. And then pretty much that's it. Like, there's a lot of talk about how the North doesn't trust outsiders, plot that goes nowhere.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff about Sansa and her fears about, Dany. That plot goes nowhere. Just a lot of Tyrion is the smartest guy on
I wouldn't say the
planet.
Sansa Dany thing didn't go nowhere because she's a major reason why Tyrion knows the truth about Jon.
Yeah, that's true.
I would say
but
the things you need to cut would be like uh Euron and Yar's conversation that kind of went nowhere. Euron and Cersei scene where she drinks the wine that goes nowhere. I guess you need to include.
But he does need to like sleep with her, right? So that he thinks the baby's his.
I guess, but even then, that doesn't go anywhere either.
I mean, one could argue that his change. Well, it doesn't make too much sense because one could argue that he needs to fight Jaime because now he thinks the baby's his, and so now he's like invested in Cersei, like he's willing to, But at the same time, he reveals that no, he just wanted to be killed by Jaime Lannister and be famous. Like you could have had a big switch, like, oh my God, like there could have been like a revolutionary change for Euron, like, oh my God, I didn't care about anything, but now I've got a son on the way. Like there could have been that big change.
Could have been, but at the end of the day, they just destroyed the character. And I love how I'm gonna ruin the motherfucker's name, Pilo Asbeck. I like how he was like defending his character.
Pillow Asbeck?
Something like that.
Pillow Asbeck. I have no
He's
idea.
defending like, what they do with the character. Dude, how can you? Come on, man. You're an actor. Stop it. But see, what I'm thinking is I want to make this edit. I want to send it to you. I want you to tell me what you think. What I'm thinking is you could cut out all the scenes with the Golden Company. In fact, Cersei does not need to appear until episode 4. The reason I say this is because the only scene you really need from King's Landing, even the whole, I guess you can include Bronn in there because the ending doesn't make sense without Bronn, I guess. The one thing that you could include there from the King's Landing stuff besides Bronn is Theon rescuing Yara. But that's it. That's all you need from that scene. You don't really need everybody going, whoa, a dragon. Well, actually, you kind of do because it's been like hundreds of years since dragons have appeared in the North. But there are a lot of stuff. Gilly scenes definitely need to go. That's number one. What else?
I would just put more Gilly scenes.
You do it.
More Gilly
Why
scenes.
do you hate me? The fucking Davos.
The most important scene. It would just be most important scene. It would begin with that little girl with the scar on her face that looks, and she would go up to Davos and she would ask like where she should go. And then Gilly would convince her to go down to the crypts, and then we'd follow her and her story and how she failed to protect anyone in the crypts.
And then they all die. The end. Well, no, like the scene where Davos is giving them all food.
She dropped the ball. That little girl dropped the ball.
You're cruel, President. But no, scenes you could cut, Davos giving them all food, just stuff like that. You don't need to have that there. You the second.
You kind of need you need the scene between Grey Worm and Missandei.
You need
talking about Noth. You don't need the racist girls. You remember the racist girls? No reason.
The North is very mistrusting of outsiders, Preston. Come on, that doesn't mean they're racist. Come on.
That's I don't know. They're mistrustful of outsiders unless they're wildlings or Vale Lords trying to save them.
You may have something here.
Oh man, what a time! What a time! That wasn't your favorite scene, Davos and Gilly? Oh God.
I'm scrolling through here the episode real quick of what other crap you could really remove
before we move on to episode 3 and 4.
Yeah, what other crap could you really remove here?
I mean, you need to have a reunion between Arya and Gendry, but I don't know. They didn't have anything for them to actually say, so they filled it in with weapon talk.
Which is, once again, they have a lot to say to each other, a lot to say. But at the same time, I guess you could make the argument that they're awkward teenagers, or at least Arya is. I think Gendry's like a young adult. They're awkward. They're awkward in general, and what are they really going to talk about? So whatever.
Is he like a teenager in the same way that the teenagers from Greece are teenagers?
I mean, what are you God, the writers really did drop the ball. I'm really gonna go back and like make one giant edit for episode 1 and 2.
Yeah, he's 32 years old, by the way.
The actor, what's his name?
Joe Dempsey.
Joe Dempsey. He's 32. He doesn't look a
32.
day over 21. Wow, Jesus Christ.
And well, I think today is his birthday.
Oh, is it? Today's his birthday? Oh shit! Happy birthday, Joe Dempsey.
No. I'm sorry. I completely.
Preston, Jesus Christ, man. We can't give out misinformation.
Time goes by faster than I thought. No, it happened days ago. Never mind.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, God.
But no, I'm going to go back with episodes 1 and 2, and I'm going to try and remove some of the fat that doesn't need to be there. Because there is quite a bit. And I think I can make a coherent episode 1 and 2 into one giant episode. What do you think?
Oh, sure. I think you can do it. It would be like 10 minutes. I do. I think that all of season 8 could be like a 30-minute project. You know,
you're out of your mind.
I mean, come on.
You're out of your mind, but you're not wrong. You're out of your mind, but you're not wrong.
Oh man.
So, how do you feel about the before we wrap up on episodes 1 and 2? How do you feel about the ending? Which, once again, my favorite part of the entire season. Actually, I really love when Podrick breaks into song.
Oh,
it's like a montage. Probably one of the better montages we've ever had in the show.
It's a fine montage. He's got a great voice. I thought the lyrics were really. I thought the music was fine. The lyrics were weak. But you know, it was fine. It's a little artificial in the sense that he's like, somebody sing me a song, and then he names every single person except for Podrick, and then Podrick happens to have this like incredible voice. Like, you know, people just aren't born with voices. You have to practice. Like, Podrick is clearly a practiced singer.
Right.
Like, you know, all that time as a squire, he never heard Podrick sing.
It's one of those hidden talents that he has. And I gotta say, once again, episode 2, my favorite. I love when Jaime knights Brienne. That was epic. I really did like that.
And you like how he stops in the middle and forgets to finish.
I'm willing to forgo that detail because the moment was very, very touching.
Because there's only 3 gods. Like a half night.
The moment was very touching, and it's just the whole feeling of like dread and all that stuff. And you know, Jon and Dany, they start to go into that conversation, and all of a sudden they're interrupted. You know, episode 2 is really definitely the best episode this entire season, hands down. It really is. They really have like everything there to make it a good. Like, this is the episode where I thought, season 8 can only go up from here, because that was great. And you really get sad because you're like, oh, everybody's gonna probably die next episode, and then we get to the next episode and it's like only some people die. They just shaved off a couple background extras and some secondary characters, not all, but only some people die. It wasn't that much of a gut punch that we thought it would be.
I wasn't hooked as much as you were on episode 2. I'm not a big fan of it, only because I'm not so much into nostalgia. Like, I don't think I'm very cynical about nostalgia because I kind of recognize that you know, the great past never existed. And so when people say, oh, let's go back to the great past, the good old days, I'm like, that never fucking happened. You know, people are like, oh, when I was a child, like, I was so carefree. No, you weren't. You don't remember your childhood, but childhood is filled with anxiety too. You know, and so
damn, dude, you're very fucking depressing. What the fuck happened? It was your birthday a couple of days ago. Happy late birthday, by the way. But what the fuck, man?
But it's this thing. I think nostalgia. Generally, I think that nostalgia is a dangerous thing. Looking back, like creating this past that we have to like revert back to that never existed, and episode 2 did a lot of that. This, you know, making Game of Thrones into this, you know, oh, the glory days, we're all good friends. This is our curtain call, because episode 2 did seem like a curtain call episode for the characters, even though they didn't die. You know, had they died, it would have been a more fitting curtain call. But instead, they kind of lingered for 4 more episodes. But it seemed like that was the episode where they're like, let's say goodbye to Game of Thrones. But none of that. There were no good times in Game of Thrones. Like all seasons were violent and filled with blood.
Well,
and
I think what they were trying to harken back to is like how things were more simple. You know, back then Tyrion was on the side of the Lannisters, Jaime was on the side of the Lannisters, Davos was on Stannis' side, and now it's all complicated and jumbled.
no, it was complicated back then. It was more complicated.
You think it was more complicated? I think it was.
Absolutely, because it was George R.R. Martin writing it.
Well, it's beyond that. Like where every character stood, it was a bit more simple than it is now. Back then, everybody had this ignorant bliss where nobody knew that the dead existed and there were no flying dragons around to burn everybody to death.
I don't know. I mean, like it went from having certain motivations to having no motivations. Like the characters in the end, like are all like irrational floating beings that just have to go from one location to another location and then have whatever emotion they decide to assign to them that episode. Like in that sense, it's more simple. Like it's chaotic, but chaos can be more simple than structure. So it's just it. I don't know. It was this like saying this sad goodbye to this like we're all sitting here and like about to die, but life is such a grand, beautiful thing, and it's like no, like every episode of Game of Thrones taught us how ugly and painful life is. There's nothing like wonderful. There's no going back to this wonderful time.
You're very depressing tonight.
No. I mean, see, this is why like I was a Star Trek fan. It's like the future is like the good times. Like that's when things will be better. The past kind of sucked. People got sick a lot. There was racism and segregation and slavery and it sucked, and so we didn't have money, like we didn't have resources. Avocados were super expensive. It was not a great time.
That's so random, but okay, go ahead.
But shrimp was outrageous, so it's the same with Game of Thrones. Like they sat around being nostalgic for nothing.
It's funny. Episode 2 felt a lot like it should have been episode 8 of season 7. And then, we get to the dreaded episode, which is the Battle of Winterfell. And then we close out season 7 with episode, what we got in episode 4, where you just end season 7 with Dany saying, "Let's fight the last war together." And that's how you would end it. And I don't know. You're right about that. It does feel like the end, not the end of the series, but the end of a season when they're all sitting around like that. And when we get to episode 3, which we will in a minute, but it'll seem like a minute for the audience, but we're really about to sign off and record again tomorrow for episode 3. Episode 3 felt like the end of something. And it just, I don't know, it didn't hit all the beats. And
you know what they could have done, actually? And I'm not saying this wouldn't have caused some people to be angry, but had they done like an episode 2 situation, but made that episode 6, and then ended the series on a cliffhanger, it would have been, people would have had a better feeling than what they got.
Cliffhanger? What do you mean?
Like, I'm saying like the last episode is everyone preparing for this final battle between Cersei and Dany, and everybody kind of like, battle's going to happen at dawn, and so you go around the camp and everyone's like having one last drink, and then you go into the castle and everyone's having their last thing, and then the episode like ends with the sunrise and the battle about to begin, and then you ended the series that way. A lot of people would have been angry, but it would have worked better. Because you would have had the tear jerking curtain call of episode 2 actually at the end of the series.
That's controversial as fuck. I'm actually curious to see what the audience thinks about that. I might put up a poll or something.
Well, it's how they ended Angel, which is and Angel was a very controversial ending, but it kind of fit because it's like, well, that's how like Angel keeps fighting. And that's how things are going to go. The statement at the end would have been, these wars are just going to keep going, or all the characters are going to die. So we don't need to see it play out because they're going to die. Or maybe some are going to survive, but they're going to die in some other future battle. It would have been very controversial, but I think it would have worked better than what we got.
That would have if you're saying that, then that this scene where they're all sitting around being nostalgic and it's very somber, that would have been a very depressing, but I guess hopeful ending. I don't know. I don't know how people would feel about that. I think the only time I've ever seen it end like that, where you're talking about, is in 300. You've seen 300, right? Yeah, where they end the entire movie with like them going off into battle again against the Persians, but this time as a unified front.
And George R.R. Martin did end a story, Dying of the Light, on a cliffhanger. But imagine, like, if the Army of the Dead is supposed to be a metaphor for death, like, we keep fighting against death, but eventually death is going to get us. Like, imagine if the last episode is, okay, they lose Winterfell, they retreat, they fight again, and then they retreat, and then Cersei takes them in King's Landing, and they're all in King's Landing awaiting the Army of the Dead. And they have one last evening, all of these people that hate each other or love each other, and they do the same curtain call, nostalgic thing. And then the last scene is like the Army of the Dead arriving at King's Landing, and then it's the end of the episode and the end of the series. Yeah, like, some people would be upset, but at the same time, like, I think it would have worked better.
It would have worked better now that we know the last episode of this fucking season was trash.
Well, I mean, anything would have worked.
Anything would have
right?
worked better, yeah. I don't know. I kind of want to throw that to the audience, like what they fuck. I really want to put like a poll up on Twitter or something. If Thrones season 8 really should have ended, the entire series should have ended on a cliffhanger in a final battle, final push against the White Walkers. Well, speaking of the White Walkers, Preston, let's get into episode 3.